Hi, and welcome to my channel. I'm a Central Texas gardener in Zone 8B, and in today's video I wanted to share my new landscape. It's been in the ground now for 2 weeks and how it's maturing and how it's doing. I also wanted to share just some other things going on in the garden, and so I hope you guys enjoy the video. So behind me here is my new landscaped area, and it's about 1,300 square feet. And just a few weeks ago, this was all lawn, and I have St. Augustine lawn primarily, which is a very thirsty lawn, and I live in a drought-prone area. I'm also in an HOA, which mandates 80% lawn, so I reduced my front lawn by about 20% and instead replaced it with a very large garden bed full of drought-tolerant, native, and well-adapted plants. This doesn't really make sense if you don't pick drought tolerant plants, because now you've just sort of traded one problem for another. So that's why I selected this particular group of plants. So my plant selection was pretty small. I wanted it to look cohesive, and I didn't want a ton of maintenance. Plus I need to maintain pretty decent visibility on this corner, so everybody needs to be able to see over these plants. The majority of these plants will stay under 3 feet. I selected dwarf Yaupon holly, which gets about 3 to 4 feet in height and spread. Mexican feathergrass, which stays under about 3 feet, but pretty vigorous and spread. Red autumn sage, which gets about 3 by 3 feet. I also selected a couple of different varieties of yucca and right skullcap. And I do have one whale's tongue agave. I also threw in some liatris and Zexmenia because I had those available. So I've had a few issues so far. Number one is, out of all the plants I've selected, the dwarf Yaupon holly has probably been a little bit more water needy, and as a matter of fact, I've got 3 out of the 25 I've planted that seem to really be struggling. And so hopefully they make it. I've just been out here giving them a little bit more water. We've had a little bit of rain, and so that's helped. But that Mexican feathergrass, red autumn sage, and everything else has really not needed a ton of watering in. The second issue I've had is the weeds. And you know, with a new garden bed, I did not put weed barrier down here. And like I said, I have a primarily St. Augustine lawn, but I had a lot of volunteer Bermuda. And I also have a bit of a nutsedge problem. Now, Bermuda and nutsedge, they spread by rhizomes. And so those are underground root systems that get quite extensive, and so pulling them up by hand is really not super effective, because unless you get that whole root network, it's just going to keep popping up in different areas. Also, likewise, using a weed burner or something that just targets the plant that you can see above ground, sometimes also not super effective. Because again, they have that extensive root network. And so I have been out here with an herbicide for both of those types of weeds about once a week. So you can kind of see where my curb sort of slants down, and this is a huge rain runoff area that leads all the way down to a culvert here. You may not be able to appreciate it, but my yard sort of does, the lawn sort of does the same thing and leads there. So I didn't put any sort of obtrusive or obstructive edging. I just try to keep it as low as possible so that it would facilitate the water moving in that direction. So I've got a couple of bare spots here in my landscape where I haven't mulched, and that is because I'm trying to get some bluebonnets to germinate, and I've had some success. You can kind of see them here. So I have some with just seed leaves, and then I have some with an actual rosette that's formed. And as I understand it, when they look like this with just seed leaves, if you want to move them around because you got a bunch in one area and want to space them out, you can. But once they start looking like this, they're working on that root system, and it's probably better to leave them in place. About the middle of September to the middle of December is a great time to put your wildflower seeds down. You want to put them, most of them you want to put them down in some bare dirt. I put this just down over the top of the soil and kind of stamped on them a little bit, and then I sort of watered them in, so it's not too late to get those bluebonnets in the ground if you're looking to do something like that. So we had a pretty heavy rain last night, and I was nervous that all my mulch may be washed out. So we're looking pretty good here. So I don't see any mulch out here on the street. And then here is another area I was kind of nervous about. I don't see that the mulch has washed out onto the rocky area. So looks like all my rocks are still in place too, so no big wash out there. All right, I am currently in my house getting ready to walk out onto the back patio. And so here is the back patio, and it has really appreciated, we had some rain, and so it's really appreciated that. And so I've done a lot of transplanting, some things that need to be taken care of. I've put a few new plants in, and so we'll talk about those. So here is that area. I just installed this spring, and it's come a long way. My zinnias are kind of getting ready to peter out, but I'll leave those even though they're going to look kind of, you know, ugly. Number one, they're going to seed, so I might get some volunteers for next year. But number two, this will feed the birds, and so the birds will come out here and eat this. Okay, so here is my Plateau Golden Eye, and you see how tall this is. I mean, I didn't really expect it to get this tall, but they can get up to 6 feet if they're grown in partial shade environments, or they tend to stay under about 3 feet if they're grown in full sun. But this plant actually took a really big hit several months ago. It just grew kind of with a slingshot, and we had a heavy wind and it split. And so I didn't know if it was going to make it. I kind of cut it down. There was a few little suckers, and it came back. And so this is just a few months of growth, but it is a prolific fall bloomer. So not much in the way of spring and summer, but great fall bloomer. So great nectar source for your pollinators. All right, so you saw the Plateau Golden Eye. Well, here is a skeleton leaf golden eye, and they are very similar in terms of what their flowers look like, but the foliage is different. The leaves are different. This has a very thin leaf, kind of like a skeleton, hence the name. This one stays, I think, under 4 feet, but can get quite a spread, versus the Plateau, which you saw can get quite a bit bigger. So here I have Russian sage, and I don't believe this is a Texas native, but it is very drought tolerant. I've got a couple of these, and these have done really well with like minimal to no watering. Just installed, like I said, this spring, and so have taken no time to get established. Behind it I have a pink thoroughwort, and this is a new to me plant. Picked it up at the Nectar Bar in San Antonio. Thanks, Drake White. And so the flowers look a lot like mist flower, but the leaves are definitely a lot smaller. This is a fall bloomer, and so again, great fall nectar source for your pollinators. So I've got a couple of plants I want to talk about here. I'll start with this one. This is a pineapple guava, and it is a small ornamental tree or a tall shrub. It gets about 15 feet in height. It's evergreen, it fruits, it flowers, and deer don't like it. So not that this area is like prone to deer, but I figured I'd give it a shot because this would be a really nice area to sort of fill out with a tree like that. I put it in the spring, and I really do think it struggled a bit to get established, and so it looks a little bit crispy, but I'm hoping it makes it through the winter and sort of rebounds and bounces back next year. But with that being said, I would tell you, especially with your shrubs and your trees, it is ideal to put those in the fall. It really does give them a little extra time to establish their root system so that they can make it through our very hot Texas summers. Here is mist flower. This is fragrant mist flower. So I've got the blue mist flower or Greg's mist flower, but this is my first fragrant mist flower, and it does smell really good, and the butterflies love it just as much because I've seen them over here. I believe this gets about 3 feet in height. I'm presuming it's equally as aggressive in spread, but I don't know. So if you know, let us know. But it's really a lovely plant, and I'm excited to see what it does next growing season. So behind me here, the big plant over here is a rock rose, and this has gotten quite large. I think it's about 4 feet in height and about 5 feet in spread. it has remained green for me throughout the winter. And so it's kind of a cool thing. I hadn't expected that, but it did. This is a liriope here, and I had it in another spot over here, but it just looked odd, and I thought it flowed better here in this spot. So I recently transplanted it now that we've had the cooler temps. Here is Wine Cup, and this is a perennial and Texas native. I grew these from seed, and they're starting to seed out. So I just collected those seeds and started to spread them in some bare spots so that hopefully I can kind of fill all of this in with those wine cups. So different perspective, still the same rock rose. Here I have some annual gomphrena, and then behind that gomphrena, some white autumn sage, and then in the container I have a blue century yucca. So this is gomphrena here, and this is an annual flower that is very heat and drought tolerant. It required minimal to no watering. I think it catches a little maybe from the sprinklers, but I was not out here watering this. And it was probably one of the few plants that really thrived in our hottest months here throughout the summer. And so a top performer in my landscape, and I definitely plan on getting some more seed packets and spreading them around. Hopefully these reseed on their own, but you know, I'm just gonna help them out a little bit. Here I have a Zexmenia, and this is probably one of my top 3 favorite Texas natives. It is just so pretty in form. It's kind of got this 3x3 feet sort of mounding habit, and very drought tolerant, minimal to no maintenance. It draws lots of pollinators, but it also draws small birds that can kind of sit on the stems and just eat the little seeds. And so I love that plant for that reason. Kind of back here, this yellow plant in the background, I think that's a Mexican hat, but maybe it's a prairie coneflower. So you guys tell me what you think it is, because most of the flowers are yellow, but then I have like an occasional one that'll have like an orange color to it. So then it makes me think it's a Mexican hat. I don't know. So let me know what you guys think that is. But it's done great, and also very drought tolerant. Greg's mist flower, and I have that in several of my garden beds. It is a great pollinator plant, and it is important for the queen butterfly in their reproduction. It gets about 2 to 4 feet in height, but the spread is pretty aggressive. I do believe that this spreads through rhizomes, so you know how that goes. If you've got a plant that spreads through rhizomes, it's going to spread wherever it wants to go. Though I'm fine with that. I'm looking to fill out this whole space, and so if it just wants to all be Greg's mist flower, and the Greg's mist flower is happy here, well, I'm going to go with the flow, because that just means less maintenance for me. Right, guys, I am happy to report that I have finally transplanted those camellias, and so this one is probably the happier of the two. I have put that in some potting soil, and I've placed a acidifier around the drip line, mulched the top of it, and we'll see how this does. I was worried that maybe it would not flower, but I think it's doing its thing, because this is a fall and winter bloomer. Here's the other camellia. This one's much worse for the wear, but you know, I did the same thing, potting soil acidifier, mulch over the top, and we'll see if this turns around. So I will just kind of go through this with you. This is a Zexmenia, which is the same thing as that plant, and I have another Zexmenia here. I have 3 right skull caps there, and then I have a Bellini crepe myrtle back here. I have a whale's tongue agave that took a huge hit in that hailstorm at the beginning of the year, but you can see the damaged leaves and then the new leaves, and so it's doing well. And then I believe this is a sun coleus, and I've never done well with coleus before. It's just kind of a partial shade area, but maybe I was overwatering it, because I have not been watering this at all, and so and it is just thriving. And back here I did have initially 2 Turk's caps, and they did great, but they didn't make it back through the winter, and I don't know why. So then I put an American Beauty berry here, which was beautiful, but then it had some sort of disease and declined. So now I've got these shrimp plants here, and this is more a shady area, and so I hope these do well. I've always thought these were just such cool like flowers and just plants in general, and I think these get about a 2 to 3 foot spread. So if all goes well, I hope this whole area just fills in nicely. All right, so I thought I would share the functional part of my garden with you here. I have got a 230 gallon rain tank which harvests rainwater from my roof. It is, I've got a pump attached here, so I've got it under pressure, which just makes it a lot easier to use. I've got a video on that if you want to check that out. I've also got a tap off of my in-ground irrigation that I've got a drip, automated drip line going out here to my vegetable garden. I don't have anything in these 2 beds, but I've got a few things here. I've got Market More cucumbers that I planted in late August from seed, and I've harvested several, I think like 10 cucumbers off here so far, and looks like we might have another flush coming through here soon. And then I also have just some herbs like basil, parsley, chives, and then I've got tomatoes here which I had planted. I threw some seeds down and they really haven't done much, and I want to show you something about that here in a moment. But then I've also got some citrus here. I've got, I think, a Satsuma orange and a Meyer lemon, and so I'll have to take these in once it gets too cold, but it looks like these are starting to get ripe. And so you notice that I said those tomatoes aren't doing anything, but let's contrast that with this volunteer tomato, which is getting like minimal attention and is already putting on all sorts of fruit here. And so the gardening is very humble that way. You know, you spend all this time and energy and putting things in the ground a certain way, and then nothing really happens, and then meanwhile a bird makes a deposit over here and it does better on its own. So that's how it is sometimes. I do have a keyhole garden here. Really didn't do much with it this year. You can see how far that compost and soil have broken down, but I've got a little, I think, Italian parsley here. But I plan on moving this over here because I'm planning on getting another rain tank, probably about 500 gallons, and putting it here. I've got a little compost bin over there. And so, and then I got a giant brush pile. This is just, you know, where everything collects. And then we do plan on putting up a hoop house for the winter, and then also using it through the summer. I did have a greenhouse, but it did not survive our big Mother's Day storm with the hail. So we'll see how that fares. I also have a potting bench here that I made with my friends Jean and Dan, and I've got a video on how to make one of those if you're interested. And so, yeah, I often don't share this part of my yard in the tours because it just looks more functional than really pretty. But I'm trying to get better at vegetable gardening, and so we'll see how it goes next year. If you're interested in seeing how I landscape these areas, please check out these next couple of videos. And until the next one, y'all take care.